Very much, Madam Speaker, and it is an honor to be able to enter into debate on what is such an important issue. I know I had attempted to enter into debate on Friday, but due to some technical difficulties and the challenges that we all face regarding COVID, I am pleased to be able to join you today on the report stage debate on Bill C-7. I'm going to attempt to address a number of different issues throughout my remarks today, acknowledging the fact that this is an incredibly sensitive subject, of which there is a diversity of opinions and views and perspectives on, and what I feel importantly that diversity needs to be respected. Now, Madam Speaker, I would bring to your attention a couple of comments actually that the Minister of Justice made in question period earlier today. He said, and this is my quick note taking. So something like there are diverse and evolving views on this, and I think that that's absolutely true. However, it was the next statement that certainly was incredibly troubling to me, and I know incredibly troubling to many in this that have participated in this debate, and certainly the hundreds of constituents that I have heard from on this matter are troubled as well. He went on to say that this does represent a consensus, quote, does represent a consensus, unquote. Madam Speaker, it is incredibly troubling that the minister would use language as definite as that to basically shut down what is valid debate on such an important subject, a subject that is literally life and death. You know, when I to use a specific example of the diversity of views that do exist on this subject, I posted on my Facebook page the other day question posed by the member, I believe, from Vancouver Granville, the former Liberal Justice Minister, about this very issue. And in the myriad of responses, of which that member's perspective is very, very different than the current Liberal Justice Ministers. In the myriad of responses, both on Facebook and that came into my office, I found it incredible how many people were reaching out, providing feedback, saying what they hoped this bill would include, what they hoped that it wouldn't include, and many more, in fact, wanted to provide input. Now, the minister talks about how they heard from 300,000 Canadians, and that's great. I certainly know, and I forwarded the consultation information to many constituents that were curious about this when those consultations were taking place. However, I find it very, very interesting because I know, in fact, in many cases, I had constituents that forwarded the information that they sent to the minister on the consultation. They also forwarded it to me. And I am afraid, Madam Speaker, certainly from the perspective of those in Battle River Crowfoot that also reached out to me, that this legislation does not address the diversity of views that exist. Now, I could go on on this particular subject, but I think that it is troubling further the definite nature to which the government has rushed this legislation through. Now, notwithstanding the proroguing of Parliament, which is a subject that I myself have litigated in this chamber prior to this point, and certainly I know we'll hear, I'm sure, a lot more about that, especially as we enter into what I think will cut off my question and comments time with the fall economic update. However, the fact that this legislation is being rushed through, there were many further witnesses that I know would have provided a valuable input to the discussion regarding this bill in committee. There was a whole series of amendments, and quite frankly, I think many good amendments. In fact, the two amendments that are being considered at report stage, I think, deserve valid consideration. Two amendments that I think are eminently reasonable to ensure that there are safeguards put in place so that ultimately Canadians are protected. I myself sat in on the Justice Committee for a short time and listened in on more of the debate, and there is much more that should have been said. So In typical Liberal fashion, I find it troubling that they seem to have manufactured a level of urgency. They prorogue Parliament. This had been introduced in the last Parliament. They prorogue Parliament and then say, well, it has to be done, and there's only a short time frame in order to do it, or else there will be significant consequences. It's that manufactured urgency that does not lead to the best public policy outcomes, and it is incumbent upon all parliamentarians. In fact, I find it interesting that the parliamentary secretary to the House Leader was just with one of my other conservative colleagues asked the question about how long we plan to drag this out. Well, I think that it's concerning that in a question as important as life and death, including life and death for the most vulnerable among us, that the government would think that that is an opportunity to rush something through, to rush legislation through. Madam Speaker, it is incredibly concerning that they would deal with what seems to be such flagrant disregard for the diversity of perspectives that exist. Now, I see that my time is quickly coming to an end, but there is no question that as I have read this bill carefully, as I said before, followed the committee proceedings very, very carefully, that we need to ensure that the most vulnerable among us are protected. I listened carefully to a press conference that included some disability advocates, professionals from Indigenous communities in our country, addressing specifically the direction that this bill was taking. And it is incredibly concerning that it seems that those perspectives were not heard in the Liberals forcing through this legislation. The fact in a community where there is already a suicide epidemic, that this government is pushing through something that goes directly contrary to the value of life that these Indigenous folks were talking about. And I think that it is incredibly concerning that those issues are not being addressed effectively. We've heard from healthcare professionals that say the lack of safeguards provide an opportunity for this to be abused. And there is nothing more final than death, Madam Speaker. And it is absolutely essential that we get this right. You know, when I was speaking with a friend as I was walking to the Justice Committee when I was going to sit in for a time, I was chatting on the cell phone with a friend, and he said, "What are you debating today?" And I said, medical assistance in dying. And we talked a little bit about that. And what I find very, very interesting was a statement that he shared back at me. He said, isn't it something that you're literally going to debate something like life and death? Madam Speaker, we all need to take incredibly seriously this information that's put before us. Now, I did want to touch very briefly, and I know my time is evaporating quickly, about how it seems that this legislation fails to acknowledge and almost create two classes of Canadians, specifically when it comes to protections and safeguards that need to be in place regarding those Canadians that have disabilities. And Madam Speaker, I am absolutely thrilled to have many folks in my life with a wide range of disabilities. I have a young man who comes into my office that has a disability and is an absolute joy. He volunteers. He loves to come in and help his member of parliament. And he calls himself my special campaign manager, an incredible, valued part of my constituency. I have classmates who have disabilities, many perspectives across this country, and the unintended consequences, I trust the unintended consequences of this bill being rushed through with wording it's ambiguous and could have significant consequences in the way that we approach a subject as important as this, leads to the fact that those who are most vulnerable within our society may feel the most significant consequences by not having appropriate safeguards in place. Now, Mr. Speaker, I see that my time is coming to a conclusion, and I know that there are very pressing subjects to discuss further, so I would just finish by saying this. Let us all take seriously what I would suggest is one of the most important aspects of our job as parliamentarians, and that is to ensure that Canadians are protected, that Canadians can live with dignity. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I will be unable to support this bill, and would encourage members carefully to consider that as we go forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I'm afraid we're out of time for debate on C-7 today, but when we continue debate on C-7, the honourable member will have 5 minutes of questions and answers coming to him, or questions and comments coming to him.